Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto became the Dragon Emperor and fell in love with Rias Gremory? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A Dragon's Awakening. The world ended in grit and ashes. Naruto lay broken in a crater of his own making, the sky above a bruised purple rent by unspeakable power. The air tasted of ozone and blood, a coppery tang that clung to his tongue. One arm was gone at the shoulder, a cauterized stump that had stopped bleeding only because his body had nothing left to give. His legs were a tangled mess of bone and tattered orange cloth. He tried to call for Sakura, for Kakashi, for the ghost of a raven-haired rival he hoped had found some semblance of peace in the final, cataclysmic exchange. No sound came out. His lungs were full of fire. Kurama was silent. The roaring inferno that had been his companion since birth, the boisterous, hateful, and eventually, loyal friend within his soul, had been reduced to a flickering ember, and now, even that ember was gone. He had given everything to fuel their final attack, a last, desperate gamble that had saved the world and cost them their existence. Naruto was alone, truly and utterly alone. As his life seeped into the cracked, thirsty earth, his vision blurred, the edges turning a hazy, dreamlike gray. He had done it. He had kept his promise. Everyone was safe. It was a hollow victory. A quiet thought that drifted through the fading landscape of his mind. He had saved the world but would never see the peace he had fought for. He would never become Hokage. He would never share another bowl of ramen with Iruka-sensei or watch Konohamaru grow into a fine shinobi. His story was over. It was then that reality buckled. A shimmer appeared beside him, a distortion in the air like heat haze on a blistering summer day. It made no sound, gave off no heat. It was simply a tear, a silent wound in the fabric of the world. It was a deep, impossible black, fringed with the light of 1,000 dying stars. Naruto felt a pull, a gentle but inexorable tug on what remained of his soul. He had no strength left to resist. He closed his eyes, his last sensation not the pain of his broken body, but a strange, weightless drift as the darkness took him. He floated in a place that was not a place. There was no up or down, no light or dark, only an endless, swirling kaleidoscope of color and muted light. Echoes of thought, remnants of forgotten dreams from a million different worlds, brushed against his consciousness like grains of sand in a cosmic tide. He was a ghost, a flicker of dying will in an ocean of infinity. He should have been terrified, but all he felt was a profound and weary peace. The fight was over. He could finally rest. Then, he felt another presence. It was ancient, vast, and like him, it was dying. A consciousness the size of a galaxy turned its languid attention toward him. An image bloomed in his mind, not a thought but a pure, undiluted memory given form. He saw a titanic dragon, larger than the mightiest mountains, its scales shimmering with the light of creation. It battled a formless, writhing chaos, a being of pure entropy that sought to unmake all that was. The dragon fought with righteous fire and claws that could shred reality, but the chaos was endless. It bled stars, its roars shaking the foundations of existence. He felt the dragon's weariness, its eons-long vigil, and the deep, abiding sorrow of its impending failure. It had contained the chaos, sealed it away in a prison of its own making, but the effort had shattered its immortal form. The dragon's spirit, a colossal, ethereal serpent of starlight, coiled around Naruto's own flickering soul. It did not speak in words. It communicated in pure intent, a wave of understanding that washed over him. The vessel is broken, but the power must endure. The seal weakens. The chaos slumbers, but it dreams. A guardian is needed. It saw him. It saw the entirety of his life in an instant. The lonely child on the swing, the prankster desperate for attention, the warrior who would move mountains for his friends, the savior who never, ever gave up. It saw the strength of a soul that had been forged in hatred and isolation but had stubbornly, defiantly chosen love and connection. It found him worthy. You will be my will. You will be my fire. You will be the Dragon Emperor. The celestial energy surged into him. It was not a violent possession but a seamless, perfect fusion. His chakra coils, shredded and empty, were not just repaired but remade, woven with divine, draconic power. The ghost of Kurama's chakra, the very essence of his own life force, ignited. The pain of his mortal wounds vanished, burned away in a torrent of golden fire. His soul, once a flickering candle, roared into a supernova. He felt his memories, his personality, his very being, his Nindo, lock into place, the bedrock foundation for this new, terrifying power. He was still Naruto Uzumaki. But he was also something more. He opened his eyes. Sunlight, warm and gentle, filtered through the thick canopy of unfamiliar trees. A soft breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of damp earth and strange, sweet blossoms. He was lying on a bed of soft moss, the ground cool beneath him. He sat up, his movements fluid and effortless. The tattered remains of his orange and black pea suit were all that was left of his old life, a stark contrast to the healthy, whole body he now inhabited. He looked at his hands, turning them over. They were his, but they felt different. Beneath the skin, a power unlike anything he had ever known thrummed with a life of its own, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated in the very marrow of his bones. He stood, his senses exploding outward. He could hear the frantic heartbeat of a rabbit 100 yards away, the lazy drone of a bee collecting pollen from a flower, the whisper of the wind as it wound its way through the forest. He could feel the life force of the trees, the vibrant energy of the earth itself. It was overwhelming, a symphony of existence he had only ever felt glimpses of in sage mode, but this was 1,000 times more potent, more innate. This was his natural state now. He took a step, and then another, trying to get his bearings. Where was he? This wasn't the land of fire. The trees were wrong, the air was wrong. There was no lingering taste of chakra in the atmosphere, none of the familiar energies of his world. He was somewhere else entirely. A profound sense of dislocation washed over him, a loneliness colder and sharper than anything he had felt as a child. He had won the war, but he had lost his entire world. A flicker of wrongness cut through his reverie. It was a sour note in the forest symphony, a predatory intent that felt oily and unclean. His new instincts, sharp and primal, screamed at him. Threat, intruder, defiler. His head snapped in its direction. Without a conscious thought, he moved. The world became a blur of green and brown as he flowed through the trees, not running, but simply willing himself forward, his feet barely touching the ground. He came to a stop in a small clearing. The scene before him made his blood run cold. A creature that looked like a nightmarish mockery of a man, with leathery bat-like wings and a cruel, twisted face, loomed over a terrified young woman. She had stumbled back against a tree, her face pale with terror, a picnic basket lying overturned at her feet. "Don't worry, little human," the creature rasped, its voice like grinding stones. "I'll make this quick. Lord Diodora rewards us strays for our initiative, and I am very, very hungry." Naruto felt no need to announce himself, no desire to trade barbs or declare his righteousness. He was the apex predator here, and this thing was an infestation in his territory. His presence settled over the clearing like a physical weight. The stray devil froze, its monologue cut short. It slowly turned, its senses, far sharper than a human's. Screaming at it, it saw a young man in ruined orange clothes, his blonde hair catching the sunlight. But it was the eyes that held it transfixed. They were a deep, piercing blue. But the pupils were slitted, like a cat's, and edged with a faint, luminous gold. The pressure rolling off him was immense, an ancient, terrifying power that made its very soul tremble. This was not a human. This was something far, far older. "What the hell are you?" the stray hissed, taking an involuntary step back. Naruto didn't answer. He simply raised his right hand, his palm open. He remembered the Rasengan, the lifetime of effort it took to master. He remembered the feel of the wind chakra spinning, grinding, tearing. He reached for that feeling now, but what answered was not the familiar blue of his chakra. A sphere of swirling, golden energy materialized in his palm, not with the high-pitched whir of the Rasengan, but with the deep, guttural hum of a slumbering star. It didn't grind, it unmade. The stray's survival instincts finally overwhelmed its arrogance. It shrieked and lunged, its claws extended, aiming to tear him apart. Naruto's movement was a study in brutal efficiency. He didn't dodge. He met the attack head-on, his body a golden blur. He thrust his hand forward, pressing the humming sphere of energy into the stray's chest. There was no explosion, no concussive blast. There was only light. The stray's shriek was cut off as its body was consumed. Its flesh, its magic, its very essence was incinerated, turned to motes of fading light and dust by the pure, draconic power. One moment, it was there. The next, it was gone. The only evidence of its existence was the faint smell of burnt ozone. The young woman, who had been watching with wide, terrified eyes, finally succumbed to the shock. Her eyes rolled back into her head, and she slumped to the ground in a dead faint. Hidden in the dense foliage 50 yards away, Sona Citri and her queen, Tsubaki Shinra, stared in stunned silence. A crimson magic circle faded at their feet. They had felt the stray's malevolent energy and had teleported to its location to dispose of it, as was their duty. They had arrived just in time to witness the entire event. President, Tsubaki whispered, her voice tight with disbelief. What was that? Sona didn't answer immediately. Her sharp, intelligent eyes were locked on the blonde man in the clearing. The power she had just felt was impossible. It wasn't demonic, holy, or draconic in any way she could classify. It was something else, something primal and absolute. It had flared for a fraction of a second, and in that second, it had felt greater than anything she had ever encountered, even dwarfing the aura of her own sister, the Devil King Seraphol Leviathan. I don't know, Sona said, her voice barely a murmur. But it's not something we can handle. We are leaving, now. This must be reported to Rias immediately. She didn't want to take her eyes off him. But she knew staying was a risk they could not afford. This being had erased a stray devil as casually as one might swat a fly. What it would do to two devils who were spying on it was a question she had no desire to answer. With a gesture, another magic circle glowed, and they vanished without a sound. Naruto stood motionless, his palm still tingling with residual power. He looked at his hand, then at the empty space where the creature had been. A strange sense of clarity washed over him. He didn't know this world, didn't understand its rules, but he understood this. There was a threat, and he had eliminated it. He had protected someone. It was that simple. That, at least, had not changed. He walked over to the unconscious woman, his footsteps silent on the forest floor. He checked her pulse, relieved to find it steady. She was just unconscious from fright. He gently picked her up. She was light in his arms. He wasn't sure where to take her, but leaving her here was not an option. As he turned, the air in the clearing grew thick and heavy. The temperature dropped several degrees. The space in front of him shimmered, and a brilliant crimson light coalesced, forming an intricate magical sigil on the ground. From it, several figures emerged. The one in the lead took his breath away. She had a cascade of crimson hair that fell to her waist, a color so rich and vibrant it seemed to shame the setting sun. Her eyes were a stunning blue-green, and her face, a perfect sculpture of aristocratic beauty, was set in a look of regal authority. She wore a school uniform. That did little to conceal a figure that could start wars. The power that radiated from her was potent, clearly marking her as the leader. She was flanked by a woman with long black hair tied in a ponytail. A gentle smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes, which held a hint of dangerous lightning. A handsome blonde boy with a princely air stood at her other side, his hand resting casually on the hilt of a sword. Behind them, a small girl with white hair and a perpetually stoic expression nibbled on a chocolate bar, her gaze unnervingly direct. Naruto instinctively tightened his grip on the woman in his arms, shifting into a defensive stance. He faced the newcomers, his body relaxed but ready to unleash hell at a moment's notice. His golden-slitted eyes narrowed, studying them, analyzing them. They were powerful, far more so than the creature he had just destroyed. But they were not a threat. Not yet. The crimson-haired woman stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the clearing before settling on him. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in his appearance, the tattered clothes of a warrior, the raw, untamed power that clung to him like a shroud, and the unconscious civilian in his arms. I am Rias Gremory, she announced, her voice smooth and confident, though he could detect a faint tremor of uncertainty. This is my territory. I ask you to identify yourself and explain what has transpired here. Naruto met her gaze, his expression unreadable. The name meant nothing to him. Her title was irrelevant. All he knew was that he was an island, and these were the first people to set foot on his shore. He stood his ground, a war-torn king in a world that was not his own, facing down a devil princess who had just stumbled upon a living, breathing myth. That, he said, his voice raspy from disuse but steady and clear, is a long story. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Gremory Gambit. The silence in the clearing was a living thing, thick and heavy with unspoken questions and the palpable thrum of power. Rias Gremory held Naruto's gaze, her blue-green eyes sharp with an aristocrat's appraisal. She had faced down ancient devils and arrogant angels, but the being before her was an enigma. He was clearly human in form, yet the energy rolling off him was anything but. It was a wild, untamed force of nature, like a storm contained within human skin. It made the hairs on her arms stand on end, a primal instinct screaming at her that she was in the presence of something far older and more dangerous than herself. Beside her, her peerage was a study in coiled tension. Kiba's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, his charming smile replaced by a look of focused intensity. Kaneko had shifted, her small frame now positioned slightly in front of Rias, a silent, stoic guardian. Akeno, ever the smiling sadist, had a flicker of genuine excitement in her eyes, a crackle of purple lightning dancing invisibly at her fingertips. A long story, Rias repeated, her tone even. She took a half-step forward. A deliberate, non-threatening gesture. I have time. You are on land protected by the House of Gremory. The creature you dispatched was a stray devil, a criminal. By our laws, you have performed a service. However, your very presence here is an anomaly. An unregistered power of your magnitude cannot simply be ignored. Naruto's eyes, those unnerving golden slitted pools, shifted from Rias to each of her companions, assessing them in a heartbeat. The swordsman was fast, the little one was strong, and the smiling woman with the ponytail wielded lightning. The redhead, Rias, was the core, the nexus of their power. He could feel it, a deep well of destructive energy that lay coiled within her. He respected their strength, their unity. It reminded him, painfully, of his own team. Gremory. He tasted the name. It meant nothing. Devils. That, at least, explained the bat-winged creature. He had read stories about such things in Jiraiya's more esoteric research scrolls. Tales dismissed as folklore. Clearly, they were not. I don't know your laws, and I don't care about your territory. I saw something trying to harm an innocent person, and I stopped it. He shifted the unconscious woman in his arms slightly, his message clear. His priority was her safety. A noble sentiment, the blonde boy, Kiba, chimed in, his voice smooth but edged with caution. Ignorance of the law is not a defense, especially in our world. Naruto's gaze snapped to him. The only law that mattered was that she was in danger. Everything else is just conversation. The raw simplicity of his statement hung in the air. It was not a boast or a threat, it was a fundamental truth from which he operated. Rias felt a flicker of admiration. In the underworld, everything was politics, lineage, and law. To find someone who operated on such a clear, unwavering principle was refreshing. And dangerous. My name is Akeno Himahima, the black-haired woman purred, her smile widening. It's a pleasure to meet someone who makes such a strong first impression. Era, you've made quite a mess. Naruto ignored the flirtatious undertone, his attention remaining on Rias. I am in a place I do not know. Surrounded by people I do not understand. I have no quarrel with you, but if you try to force my hand, you will regret it. The sheer, unadorned confidence of his words was more potent than any threat. He wasn't posturing, he was stating a fact. Rias knew, with a certainty that chilled her, that he could likely kill them all where they stood. Sona's frantic, whispered report had not been an exaggeration. We have no wish for a fight, Rias said, raising a hand to placate her peerage. She needed to de-escalate this, to turn this confrontation into a negotiation. You say you are lost. We can help you. We can offer you shelter, and information. All we ask in return is to understand who, and what, you are. Naruto considered her offer. He was completely adrift. He needed a map, a guide to this strange new world. While his instincts told him to trust no one, his experience told him that isolating himself in a foreign land was a fool's gambit. This Rias Gremory, for all her demonic power, seemed more curious than hostile. And more importantly, she was a leader. He understood leaders. He understood the burdens they carried and the calculations they made. Before he could answer, the world went cold. A sudden, oppressive pressure descended upon the clearing, a palpable aura of malice tinged with a faint, cloying holiness. It was an energy that set Naruto's teeth on edge, a discordant note that grated against his own life-filled power. Well, what do we have here? A new voice mocked from above. A little gathering of devil filth. And something else. They all looked up. Perched in the branches of the towering trees that circled the clearing were a dozen figures. They had the forms of humans, but each had a pair of black, feathered wings sprouting from their backs. They were clad in dark, form-fitting combat armor, and in their hands, they held spears made of pure, solidified light. Fallen angels. Mittelt, Kalawarner, Rias hissed, her eyes narrowing in fury. You dare trespass in my territory? A woman with short blue hair and a sadistic smirk, presumably Kalawarner, laughed. Your territory. We followed a power signature that nearly tore a hole in the sky, Gremory. We came expecting a prize, and it looks like we found one. Her eyes fixed on Naruto, a greedy, covetous light in them. Forget the devils. Him. Seize him. Lord Azazel will. I'll be very interested in what makes a being like that tick. Naruto's expression didn't change, but a low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound that was not entirely human. He gently set the unconscious woman down behind him, placing her at the base of a tree. When he straightened up, the air around him shimmered with golden heat. Stay back, Rias commanded her peerage, stepping forward. This is an official Gremory matter. Leave now, and I will forget this intrusion. I don't think so, little princess. The fallen angel in the lead, a scantily clad blonde named Mittelt, sneered. She raised her light spear. Kill the devils. Take the anomaly alive if you can, in pieces if you can't. In perfect unison, the 12 fallen angels launched themselves from the trees, a deadly rain of black feathers and holy light. 6 spears of condensed light streaked toward Rias and her group, while the other 6 fallen swooped down directly on Naruto. The world exploded into motion. Kiba, you take the left flank. Kaneko, defense. Rias ordered, crimson energy gathering in her hands. Kiba was a blur of motion. In the span of a single breath, he appeared in front of a fallen angel, his demonic sword a silver streak in the fading light. Steel met light with a screech of protesting energy. Kaneko, her small frame belying her immense strength, punched a light spear out of the air, the holy energy diss. Eye-patting harmlessly against her Tuki-enhanced fists. Akino's laughter pealed through the clearing as a bolt of purple lightning crashed down from the sky, sending one of the fallen spiraling to the ground, his wings smoking. Naruto moved with an economy of motion that was terrifying to behold. He didn't bother with flashy techniques. As the first fallen angel dove at him, spear leveled at his heart, Naruto simply sidestepped. The movement was so fluid, so instantaneous, it was as if he hadn't moved at all, but the world had shifted around him. His hand shot out, grabbing the fallen by the face. He didn't stop. He continued his forward momentum, using the fallen's own body as a battering ram, and slammed him headfirst into a second attacker. The sound of cracking armor and bone was sickeningly loud. He tossed them aside like broken dolls. A third and fourth came at him from the sides, their light spears creating a deadly crossfire. Naruto didn't even look at them. He stomped his foot on the ground. A shockwave of pure, golden force erupted from the point of impact, not just cracking the earth but liquefying it for a moment. The 2 fallen angels were thrown off balance, their attacks going wide. It was all the opening he needed. He became a golden blur, weaving between them. A knife hand strike to the throat of one, an elbow to the temple of the other. Both dropped to the ground, unmoving. In less than 10 seconds, 4 of their attackers were neutralized without him breaking a sweat. Rias, who had been preparing a massive blast of her power of destruction, watched in stunned disbelief. She had seen powerful fighters before. She had witnessed her own brother, Sears's Lucifer, in action. But this was different. This wasn't just power. It was a transcendent level of combat instinct. He moved like he was born in the heart of a battlefield. Impossible. Kalawarner shrieked from above, watching her subordinates get dismantled. Who is he? Naruto looked up, his golden eyes locking onto her. He raised his right hand, palm open. He remembered the feeling from before, the swirling ball of energy. This time, He gave it form, he gave it a purpose. Wind, sharp and cutting, gathered in his palm. But it was infused with the golden, draconic energy that was now his own. It wasn't the familiar blue of the Rasengan. A sphere of violent, golden light spun into existence, not humming, but roaring like a caged dragon. Tendrils of pure energy lashed out from it, scorching the air. He could feel the new name for it bubble up from the fused consciousness within him. Ryujin Rasengan, the dragon god's spiraling sphere. You talk too much, he said, his voice flat. He didn't throw it, he bent his knees, his muscles coiling. The ground beneath his feet cracked under the strain. And then he launched himself upward. He didn't fly, he jumped, a golden comet streaking through the air, closing the 100-foot distance in the blink of an eye. Calawarner's eyes went wide with terror. She tried to bring her light spear up to defend herself, but she was laughably slow. Naruto was already there, his face a mask of cold fury. He thrust the roaring golden sphere forward. Burn, he commanded. The Ryujin Rasengan connected with her chest. The result was not an explosion but an implosion of golden fire. Calawarner's scream was devoured by the light. The draconic energy didn't just destroy her body. It consumed her very essence, her soul, her life force, using it as fuel. For a terrifying second, she became a silhouette of black against a miniature sun, and then she was simply gone. Naruto landed back on the ground with a soft thud, the golden energy in his hand dissipating as if it had never been. The clearing fell into an absolute, deathly silence. The remaining fallen angels froze in midair, their faces masks of pure, unadulterated terror. The devils stared, their own skirmishes forgotten. Hiba's sword was half raised. Akino's smile had vanished, replaced by an expression of utter shock. Kaniko's stoic facade had cracked, her eyes wide with disbelief. Rias felt a shiver run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The power she had just witnessed, it was absolute. It was the power to unmake. It was the kind of power that legends were built around, the kind that ended ages and began new ones. Mittelt, the leader, was the first to break. She let out a choked cry of fear, turned, and flew, abandoning her mission, her comrades, her pride. Her only thought was to escape. The other remaining fallen angels were not far behind, scattering into the night sky like frightened crows. No one tried to stop them. The battle was over. The immediate threat was gone. Naruto stood in the center of the clearing, the bodies of the fallen strewn around him, his breathing even. His posture relaxed. He looked less like a warrior who had just finished a battle and more like a man who had completed a tiresome chore. He turned to face the devils, his expression unreadable. You were saying something about shelter. Rias took a moment to compose herself, to force the image of Calawarner's utter annihilation from her mind. She smoothed down her uniform, reassuming her air of regal composure, though it felt like a fragile shield. Yes, she said, her voice a little breathless. She gestured to the side. Our base of operations is nearby. It is safe, secure. We can talk there, without interruptions. She looked at the unconscious civilian, then back at Naruto. We will ensure she gets home safely and with her memory of these events erased. Naruto nodded slowly. He needed a place to think, to process. This world of devils and fallen angels was far more complex and dangerous than he had initially thought. And these people, Rias Gremory's group, were at the center of it. Aligning with them, even temporarily, was the most logical move. Lead the way, he said. Rias gave a sharp nod, and a crimson Gremory magic circle glowed to life at their feet. Hiba gently lifted the unconscious woman, while Kaniko and Akino gathered around their king. Naruto stood his ground, observing the strange energy of the teleportation circle with a wary curiosity. This will transport us instantly, Rias explained, seeing his hesitation. He gave a curt nod of understanding and stepped into the circle. He met Rias's eyes one last time before the light consumed them. He saw caution there, and fear. But he also saw something else, a spark of intense, burning fascination. She had just seen a glimpse of the dragon, and far from being frightened away, she wanted to know more. The world dissolved in a swirl of crimson light, the foundation of a world-shaking alliance built on a bedrock of blood, mystery, and overwhelming power. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. A Devil's Bargain. The world reformed in a swirl of crimson light and the scent of old paper and black tea. Naruto's senses, still on a razor's edge from the fight, catalogued the new environment in a fraction of a second. They were in a large, wood-paneled room that felt more like a comfortable, slightly neglected university professor's office than a demonic fortress. Tall bookshelves overflowed with tomes bound in cracked leather. A mismatched set of plush sofas was arranged around a low wooden table, and a large mahogany desk sat in the corner, piled high with paperwork. The air was warm, a stark contrast to the chill of the forest. It was a place of quiet contemplation, a jarring shift from the life-or-death violence of moments ago. He could feel the lingering traces of potent magic woven into the very fabric of the building. A silent, powerful warding. Kiba, still carrying the unconscious woman, gave Rias a nod and disappeared through a side door without a word, his movements efficient and practiced. "Akeno, would you please put on some tea?" Rias asked, her voice regaining its smooth, authoritative tone as she moved into the familiar comfort of her domain. "Of course, President," Akeno replied with a graceful curtsy, her smile returning as she glided toward a small kitchenette tucked into an alcove. The easy familiarity of the exchange was not lost on Naruto. This was more than a base, it was their home. Rias gestured toward one of the velvet sofas. "Please, have a seat. You are safe here." Naruto remained standing in the center of the room, a silent, watchful sentinel. Hi's tattered orange jumpsuit looked wildly out of place amidst the room's genteel clutter. "I'm fine where I am." He wasn't ready to relax, not yet. Trust was a currency earned in blood and fire, and they had not yet paid the price. Rias did not press the issue. She took a seat opposite him, her posture regal, and folded her hands in her lap. The directness of her gaze was unwavering. "The fallen angels called you an anomaly. Sona Citri, the one who first detected your presence, reported a power unlike any she had ever felt. So, I will ask again, now that we are away from prying eyes. Who, and what, are you?" The remaining members of her peerage took up positions around the room, a silent, supportive phalanx. Kaneko hopped onto a stool near the kitchenette, unwrapping a new chocolate bar, but her cat-like eyes never left him. He could feel her power, a dense, physical strength that was coiled tight within her small frame. Naruto met Rias's gaze. He owed her at least a partial explanation. She had offered him sanctuary when he had none. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki." He paused, the words feeling foreign even to him. "Where I come from, I was a shinobi, a soldier. We just finished a war that nearly destroyed our world. In the final battle, I was," he searched for the right word, "displaced. I woke up in that forest. As for what I am, I was human. Now," he looked at his own hands. A flicker of uncertainty crossing his face for the first time. "Something has changed. This power is as new to me as it is to you." It was the truth, if not the whole truth. The memory of the celestial dragon, the fusion of their souls, was still a chaotic, incandescent storm in his mind. He couldn't explain it because he didn't fully understand it himself. Akeno returned with a tray, placing a steaming cup of tea before Riasen. After a moment's hesitation, setting another on the table in front of the empty sofa, a silent invitation. "From another world," Akeno mused, her voice a low purr. "How fascinating. That would explain why your energy feels so pure, so untainted by the factions of our own realm." Factions. Naruto latched onto the word. Rias took a delicate sip of her tea, using the moment to organize her thoughts. This was the critical juncture. The information she provided now would shape his perception of their world and her place in it. "Our world is governed by a fragile trinity of power," she began, her voice taking on the cadence of a lecturer. "The devils, of which we are a part, reside in the underworld. We are beings of magic and freedom, though our detractors would call us tempters and corruptors. Then there are the angels of heaven, servants of the biblical God, who represent order and faith. And finally, the fallen angels, those who were cast out of heaven for harboring impure thoughts. The ones you fought earlier were a rogue splinter group." She paused, letting the information sink in. Centuries ago, the three factions engaged in a great war. It was a cataclysm that ravaged all our realms. The leaders of all three sides, including the original four great Satans and God himself, were killed. The war ended not in victory, but in mutual exhaustion. We have been in a cold war ever since, a tense peace where any major incident could ignite the flames once more. Naruto listened, his expression impassive, but his mind was racing. War, fallen leaders, a fragile peace, it was the story of his own world, just with different names and faces. The game was always the same. You have a king, Naruto stated, looking at Rias. And they are your vassals. Rias looked momentarily surprised by his astuteness. In a manner of speaking, most of us are part of my peerage. After the war, our population was decimated. To rebuild our numbers, my brother, the current Devil King, Sears X Lucifer, helped create the evil peace system. Based on the game of chess, a high-class devil like myself is granted a set of 15 pieces, a queen, 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, and 8 pawns. We can use these to reincarnate other beings, humans or otherwise, into devils to serve in our house. She gestured to her companions. Akeno is my queen, Kaneko is one of my rooks, and Kiba, who you met earlier, is one of my knights. They are my servants, but they are also my precious family. The word, servants, hung in the air. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. He thought of his own bonds. His friendships with Sakura, Shikamaru, Gaara. They were bonds forged of mutual respect and shared hardship, not a magical contract of servitude. So you enslave others to fight your battles, he said. The words blunt and sharp. Rias stiffened, a flash of indignation in her eyes. It is not enslavement. We offer them a new life, power, a place to belong. It is a reincarnation, a second chance. A chance to die for your cause, Naruto countered, his voice flat. A collar is a collar, no matter how gilded the chain. An uncomfortable silence descended. Kiba had returned, standing silently by the door, and his hand instinctively went to his sword hilt at the perceived insult to his king. Akeno's smile tightened, a hint of lightning crackling in the air. You don't understand, Rias began, but was cut off, not by Naruto, but by Kaneko. The small, white-haired girl had hopped off her stool and walked over to him, holding out a bar of chocolate. Her face was as stoic as ever, but her golden eyes held a flicker of something else. Understanding, perhaps. You fight to protect, she said, her voice a soft monotone. We do, too. Naruto was taken aback. He looked down at the small girl. At the simple offering. He had been so focused on the system, on the cold mechanics of power and servitude, that he had missed the truth in front of him. They were a team, a family, just like his own. The structure was different, but the core of it, the loyalty, the bond, that was something he understood perfectly. He reached out and gently took the chocolate bar, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips for the first time since he'd woken up in this world. Thanks. The tension in the room dissipated as quickly as it had formed. Rias watched the exchange, a complex emotion in her eyes. This man, this Naruto, he was not a monster. He was not a mindless force of destruction. He was a warrior with a code, a man who understood bonds. He saw the world in black and white, in terms of protector and protected. And he had just accepted a gesture of peace from the quietest member of her family. Perhaps, Rias said softly, a genuine smile gracing her lips, you are right. The system is not perfect, but it is what we have. And my peerage, my family, is what I fight for. Naruto met her gaze, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine connection passed between them. He saw the immense pressure she was under, the weight of a name, a legacy, and the lives of those who followed her. She saw the profound loneliness in him, the weariness of a soul. Dyer who had lost his home but not his purpose. Their moment of burgeoning understanding was violently shattered. The air in the center of the room warped and shimmered with intense heat. With a sound like a roaring inferno, a magic circle of brilliant, fiery orange blazed into existence on the floor. It was a flamboyant, arrogant display, a stark contrast to the subtle elegance of Rias's own teleportation sigil. From the heart of the flames, a young man emerged, flanked by 2 women in maid outfits. He was handsome in a conventional sense, with short blonde hair and a smug, self-satisfied smirk plastered on his face. He was dressed in an expensive-looking suit, and the aura of power that rolled off him was ostentatious and hot, like a forge blast. He ignored everyone else in the room, his eyes fixing on Rias with a look of possessive ownership. Rias, my darling, he boomed, his voice dripping with condescension. Riser has come to bring you the most wonderful news. Our families have finally set the date for our wedding. Rias's face went pale, her brief moment of warmth replaced by a mask of icy fury. Riser Phoenix, she spat, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. You were not invited here. This is the human world. You have no jurisdiction and no right to enter my territory without my permission. Nonsense. Riser scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. What belongs to the house of Phoenix is Riser's, and you, my dear, belong to Riser. We are pure-blooded devils. It is our sacred duty to continue our bloodlines. It was then that his gaze finally fell upon Naruto, who had not moved. Who had simply stood and watched the entire exchange with a calm, analytical detachment. Riser's eyes swept over Naruto's ruined clothes and the strange, untamed energy he exuded. A look of disdain crossed his face. And who is this stray you've picked up? Riser sneered, his tone mocking. He smells of filth and desperation. Does he have a name, or should Riser just have him put down to clean up your clubhouse? The room went deathly quiet. Akino's smile was gone, replaced by a look of murderous intent. Kiba's sword was half drawn, a low hum of energy emanating from the blade. Kaniko's hands were clenched into fists. But Naruto's expression didn't change. He had faced down beings of unimaginable power who spoke of remaking the world. He had fought gods who treated mortals as insects. The preening, arrogant posturing of this, Riser, was nothing. He was just a bully with a bit of power, and Naruto knew exactly how to deal with bullies. He met Riser's arrogant glare with his own cold, golden-slitted gaze. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a shard of ice. You should choose your next words very, very carefully. Riser, who had clearly expected fear or at least deference, was taken aback. His smirk faltered, replaced by a flush of anger. To be spoken to in such a way by this nothing, in front of his future wife was an intolerable insult. You dare speak to Riser that way? He roared, and the flames of the Phoenix clan erupted around him, a swirling vortex of fire that caused the temperature in the room to skyrocket. You will learn your place, worm. Rias's peerage moved as one, stepping forward to shield her, to face the inferno. But they were too slow. Naruto took a single, deliberate step forward, placing himself directly between the enraged Phoenix and Rias. He didn't power up. He didn't summon a sphere of golden energy. He didn't draw a weapon. He just stood there, an immovable object against an inferno. The flames licked at the air around him, parting as if they were afraid to touch him. His tattered jumpsuit fluttered in the intense heat, but he did not even blink. He simply held Riser's gaze, a silent, absolute promise of annihilation contained within the depths of his draconic eyes. The playful arrogance was gone, replaced by the cold, hard certainty of a veteran warrior. This was not a conversation anymore. A line had been crossed. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Phoenix's Challenge. The inferno of the Phoenix clan roared within the confines of the Occult Research Club, a vortex of golden ore. Ange flames that threatened to consume everything. The heat was so intense that the varnish on the wooden floor began to bubble, and the air crackled with raw, untamed power. Riser Phoenix stood at its center, a petulant god of fire. His face contorted in a mask of wounded pride and rage. Naruto did not move. He stood as a bulwark against the storm, the flames parting around him as if repelled by an unseen force. His presence, his utter lack of fear, was a greater insult to Riser than any spoken word. It rendered Riser's grand display of power impotent, a child's tantrum in the face of a mountain. Riser, stop this at once. Rias commanded, her own crimson aura of destruction flaring to life, pushing back against the heat. You will not harm a guest under my protection. Your guest, Riser snarled, his eyes never leaving Naruto. This worm dared to disrespect Riser. He disrespected the house of Phoenix. He will burn for his insolence, and Riser will have his ashes scattered as a lesson. To all who would dare look down on their betters. The only one I see looking down, Naruto's voice cut through the roar of the flames, calm and lethally sharp, is a spoiled child standing on a pile of his family's accomplishments. Pretending he built it himself. The flames exploded outward. Riser let out a roar of pure fury, his control snapping. A massive wave of fire surged toward Naruto. Before Rias or her peerage could even react, Naruto raised a single hand, palm outward. He didn't erect a barrier or summon a counterattack. He simply met the inferno with his will. A wave of invisible, primordial force radiated from him. A pressure that felt as ancient and unyielding as creation itself. The firestorm hit this unseen wall and shattered, dissipating into harmless plumes of heat and light that washed over the room. The books on the shelves didn't even flutter. Silence. The flames died down, leaving Riser standing there, panting, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. He had put a significant amount of power into that attack, enough to incinerate a city block. It had been nullified, effortlessly. How? Riser stammered. Naruto lowered his hand. That's your power. All heat and no substance. You're a firecracker trying to pass itself off as a star. The insult, so casually delivered, hit Riser harder than any physical blow could have. His entire identity was built on the power of the Phoenix clan, his flames. His immortality. To have it dismissed so easily was to have his very existence trivialized. You want a real fight? Riser hissed, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. His pride, shattered and raw, demanded vindication. Riser challenges you. A duel, here and now, to the death, or until one of us can no longer stand. Let us see what you are when you have nowhere to hide. Riser. No. Rias stepped forward. I will not permit an unsanctioned duel in my territory. This ends now. She knew Riser's game. He was goading Naruto, relying on his famed immortality to secure a victory. No matter how powerful Naruto was, how could he defeat an opponent who could not be killed? This isn't about you anymore, Rias, Riser sneered, his eyes locked on Naruto. This is about honor. Unless, of course, your little stray is a coward. Does he only know how to hide behind a woman's skirts? Rias's expression hardened. She was trapped. To refuse was to allow Riser to claim Naruto was a coward. To accept was to potentially send Naruto to his doom against an immortal foe. She looked at Naruto, a silent plea in her eyes. Don't do this. It's a trap. Naruto saw her conflict, the genuine fear she had for his well-being. He gave her a look, a fleeting glance that was surprisingly gentle. It said, "It's all right. I've got this." He turned his full attention back to Riser. A predatory stillness settling over him. He had been a soldier, a hero, a savior. But beneath it all, he was a warrior. And a warrior's pride, once challenged so blatantly, demanded a response. I accept your challenge, Naruto said, his voice devoid of emotion. The words sealed their fate. A triumphant, cruel smirk spread across Riser's face. Excellent. Riser will enjoy breaking you. He snapped his fingers, and his fiery magic erupted once more, not as an attack, but as a tool of creation. The walls of the Occult Research Club dissolved, not into rubble, but into shimmering particles of light. Reforming and expanding at an impossible rate. In seconds, they were no longer in the cozy clubhouse. They stood on the sun-bleached sands of a vast arena, a perfect replica of the Roman Colosseum. Stretching for a mile in every direction under a perpetually twilight sky. High in the stands, Rias and her peerage appeared, seated on one side. Across from them, a new group materialized. Ed from a pillar of fire, Riser's peerage, led by his sister, Revel Phoenix. They all wore expressions of supreme confidence, ready to watch their master put this upstart in his place. Let the stage be set, Riser declared, spreading his arms wide, basking in the glory of his own creation. He was in his element now, a performer about to put on a show. There will be no rules, save one. The fight ends when I say it ends. He shed his suit jacket, revealing a toned, muscular torso. From his back, 4 magnificent wings of pure flame erupted, bathing the arena in a brilliant, golden light. Naruto remained unchanged, his hands tucked into the pockets of his tattered pants. He looked around the arena, not with awe, but with a flat, unimpressed gaze. He had fought in wastelands that spanned entire countries. This little pocket dimension was quaint by comparison. Are you done? Naruto asked, his tone bored. Or is there more preening you need to do before we get started? With a final roar of fury, Riser launched himself into the air, a living meteor of fire. You are finished. The duel began. Riser's opening salvo was a storm of fireballs, each the size of a carriage, that rained down on Naruto's position. They struck the sand with concussive force, throwing up massive plumes of superheated glass and smoke. It was a display of overwhelming, destructive power meant to awe and intimidate. From her seat in the stands, Rias watched with her heart in her throat. He can't just stand there and take that. But Naruto wasn't there. As the last fireball struck, he emerged from the cloud of dust, completely untouched. He hadn't dodged. He had simply walked, his pace unhurried, weaving through the deluge of explosions with an impossible grace. He moved not like he was predicting the attacks, but like he knew where they would land before Riser had even thrown them. His combat senses, honed by years of war and now amplified to a godlike degree, painted a perfect picture of the battlefield in his mind. Riser, enraged by the miss, dove from the sky, his body wreathed in flames, his fists cocked back for a devastating strike. Naruto waited until the last possible second, then sidestepped. The movement was so minimal, so economical, that Riser shot past him, his fists carving two deep furrows in the sand where Naruto had been a microsecond before. "Stop dodging and fight me," Riser bellowed, turning to unleash another torrent of fire. "I am," Naruto replied, his voice calm. He was fighting. He was gathering information. He watched the way Riser moved, the way the flames emanated from his body. The subtle fluctuations in his demonic energy. Riser was powerful, yes, but he was also sloppy. He was all offense, with no thought to defense, relying completely on his regeneration. A fatal flaw. For 5 minutes, the pattern continued. Riser attacked with ever-increasing ferocity, throwing everything in his arsenal at Naruto. Hellfire pillars, phoenix-shaped blasts, rains of flaming feathers. And Naruto simply moved. He flowed around the attacks like water around a rock, his expression unchanging, his breathing steady. He was mapping his opponent, learning his rhythm, identifying his weaknesses. In the stands, Riser's peerage was growing uneasy. Their master was landing nothing. It was like watching a man try to punch the wind. Rias's peerage, on the other hand, was starting to understand. "He's not just dodging," Kiba murmured, his eyes wide with a swordsman's respect. "He's dissecting him. He's letting him burn himself out," Akino added, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. How deliciously cruel. Finally, Riser landed a blow. A lucky shot, a backhand that caught Naruto on the cheek as he sidestepped a larger attack. The sound cracked through the arena. A thin line of blood trickled from Naruto's lip. Riser's face lit up with triumph. "There, you see, you are not untouchable." Naruto stopped moving. He slowly raised a hand to his lip, looking at the smear of red on his fingertip. His expression remained placid, but something in the air shifted. The temperature in the arena, which had been scorching hot from Riser's flames, suddenly dropped. A cold, immense pressure began to radiate from Naruto, a presence that made the very sand tremble. The observation phase was over. "My turn," he said. In the next instant, he vanished. He reappeared directly in front of Riser, his fist buried to the wrist in the phoenix's stomach. Riser's eyes bulged, a choked gasp escaping his lips. He hadn't even seen him move. Naruto ripped his fist and delivered a brutal elbow to Riser's jaw, snapping his head back with an audible crack. He followed it with a sweeping leg kick that took Riser's feet out from under him, sending him crashing to the sand. Before Riser could even process what had happened, Naruto was on him. He didn't use any grand techniques. It was a simple, savage display of taijutsu, each strike delivered with surgical precision and overwhelming force. A punch to the ribs that shattered bone, a kick to the solar plexus that expelled all the air from his lungs, a knee to the face that flattened his nose. Flames erupted from Riser's body, his wounds healing almost as fast as they were inflicted. "It's useless," he gasped, grinning through a mouthful of blood. "Riser is immortal. You cannot kill me. I don't need to kill you," Naruto replied, his voice a low growl. He dodged a wild swing from Riser and grabbed his arm, twisting it at an unnatural angle. "I just need to break you." He spun, using Riser's momentum against him, and hurled him across the arena. Riser tumbled through the sand, his body already regenerating, and rose to his feet, laughing. "Is that all? My turn." He gathered his power, a massive Fear of concentrated fire forming above his head, a miniature sun that radiated pure, annihilating heat. This is the end. Be reduced to ashes. Phoenix Flare. He hurled the attack. It was his ultimate move. A blast powerful enough to vaporize a mountain. Naruto met the attack head-on. He brought his hands together, then thrust his right palm forward. Rasengan. A sphere of spiraling blue chakra appeared in his hand. It looked small, insignificant compared to Riser's massive sun. But as the two attacks collided, it was Riser's that was consumed. The Rasengan did not explode. It ground into the Phoenix Flare, its rotational power tearing the attack apart, shredding the condensed fire and demonic energy, and absorbing it into its own vortex. In seconds, the ultimate attack of the Phoenix clan was gone. Completely unmade by the spiraling sphere. Riser stared in absolute horror. That was impossible. That attack had defied the laws of magic. Naruto didn't give him time to recover. He closed the distance in a flash of movement. The Rasengan still roaring in his hand. He slammed it into Riser's chest. The grinding, tearing sound was horrific as the sphere tore through flesh and fire, disrupting the flow of demonic energy and overwhelming Riser's regeneration. Riser screamed, a raw, agonized sound, as his very life force was shredded. The Rasengan dissipated, leaving a gaping, smoking wound in Riser's chest that was slow to heal. He stumbled back, his immortality faltering for the first time. The rapid, forced regeneration was draining his demonic power at an alarming rate. Fear, a foreign and terrifying emotion, began to creep into his heart. This is impossible, he whispered. You're a monster. Naruto stood before him, his expression cold. The small cut on his lip was already gone. Healed without a trace. You wanted a fight. You challenged a warrior. You just didn't realize what you were inviting into your little sandpit. He raised his hand. The pressure in the arena intensified 100-fold. This time, it wasn't a blue Rasengan that formed in his palm. It was a sphere of pure, incandescent gold, a miniature star that hummed with the power of creation. Chi was the same energy he had used to erase the fallen angel. The Ryujin Rasengan. At the sight of that golden sphere, every devil in the stands felt a primal, soul-deep terror. Revel Phoenix screamed her brother's name. Rias gripped the stone railing in front of her, her knuckles white. That was the power that could unmake. Riser's arrogance finally shattered, replaced by pure, abject terror. He saw his own death in that golden light. I yield, he screamed, stumbling backward and falling to the sand. I forfeit. The match is over. Riser yields. Naruto stopped, the golden sphere still humming in his hand. He looked down at the broken, terrified devil groveling in the sand. He had won. He had proven his point. There was no honor in striking down a defeated foe. He let the power fade, the golden light retracting into his palm. He turned his back on Riser and began to walk away. As he did, he met Rias's eyes across the vast expanse of the arena. Relief washed over her face, followed by something deeper, awe, respect, and an undeniable attraction to the sheer, uncompromising strength she had just witnessed. In that moment of connection, a jolt, sharp and violent, shot through both of their minds. The world vanished, replaced by an image of absolute, mind-breaking horror. They saw a void, a darkness deeper than the space between stars. And in that void, an eye opened. It was not a physical eye, but an eye made of pure chaos and malevolent consciousness. It was ancient, vast, and it was waking up. They felt a psychic scream that was not a sound but a wave of pure entropy, a promise of unmaking for all of existence. The vision lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. Naruto stumbled, clutching his head, a sharp pain lancing through his skull. Rias gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her face pale. They both looked at each other, their expressions mirrors of shock and dread. They had seen the same thing. They had felt the same ancient, terrifying presence. The pocket dimension collapsed, the Colosseum dissolving back into the familiar, comfortable confines of the Occult Research Club. Riser and his peerage were gone, having retreated in shame and terror. It was just Naruto, Rias, and her family. The air was thick with the aftermath of the battle and the lingering horror of the shared vision. Naruto was no longer just a mysterious guest. He was the man who had humbled the immortal Phoenix. He was a being whose power could cause ripples that disturbed the slumber of forgotten gods. And in that moment, Rias Gremory knew, with absolute certainty, that her life, and the fate of her world, had just been irrevocably changed. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Dark. The ghost of the Colosseum faded, leaving the scent of ozone and the heavy silence of a bottle's end. Rias's peerage stared at Naruto, their expressions a mixture of awe and a new, profound respect. He had not just defeated an immortal, he had systematically dismantled his pride, his power, and his will to fight. He had faced the pinnacle of a noble house and treated him like a petulant child. Rias rushed to his side, her composure cracking for a moment. Naruto, are you all right? That vision, I saw it too. And I. Naruto met her gaze, his own eyes dark with a disquiet he could not hide. I saw it, he confirmed, his voice low. The psychic scream of that chaotic entity still echoed in the depths of his soul. It was a malice that dwarfed anything he had ever faced, including Kagaya's world-ending ambition. It felt hungry. Before they could speak further, the air in the center of the room grew heavy and cold. A magic circle, far larger and more intricate than any Naruto had seen before, blazed to life on the floor. It was a deep, authoritative crimson, etched with the regal sigil of the House of Gremory, but amplified with an authority that spoke of absolute dominion. From it stepped a woman in a French maid's uniform, her silver hair braided, her expression as impassive and cold as a winter sky. The power she radiated was immense, easily eclipsing risers, a quiet, controlled strength that was more intimidating than any fiery display. Rias Ajosama, the maid said, her voice a respectful but firm monotone. She bowed slightly. Lord Searsex requests your presence in the underworld immediately. He wishes to be introduced to your guest. Her violet eyes flicked to Naruto. And for a fraction of a second, her composure wavered, a flicker of surprise in her gaze. She could feel the universe-altering power simmering beneath his skin. Rias's face paled slightly. A direct summons from her brother, the Devil King Searsex Lucifer, delivered by his queen, Graphia Lucifuge, was no small matter. The news of Riser's defeat had traveled faster than she could have imagined. The political fallout had begun. Of course, Graphia-san, Rias said, her voice regaining its formal tone. She turned to Naruto. This is my brother. He is one of the 4 great Satans who rule the underworld. We have to go. To ignore this would be an act of rebellion. Naruto gave a curt nod. Hiding was not an option. The ripples from his fight were already turning into a tidal wave. And the only way to survive a tidal wave was to ride it. Let's go. Graphia's magic circle expanded to encompass them all. The world dissolved, not into a chaotic swirl, but with the smooth, silent efficiency of a master's touch. The transition was instantaneous. One moment they were in the cozy clubhouse, the next they stood in the cavernous receiving hall of a Gothic palace. The sky, visible through impossibly high stained glass windows, was a permanent, breathtaking crimson. The architecture was a marvel of spires and arches that defied gravity, lit by floating globes of soft, magical light. The air itself felt thick with demonic energy. It was a place of immense power and ancient lineage. This was the heart of the Gremory domain. Waiting for them was a man who could only be Rias's brother. He had the same striking crimson hair, but his eyes held the deep, weary wisdom of a ruler who had seen millennia of conflict. He wore elegant, regal attire, but carried himself with a disarming, gentle smile. Beside him stood a man with a stern face and dark hair, and a woman with long, flowing black hair whose beauty was matched only by the clear intelligence in her eyes. Lord and Lady Gremory, Rias's parents. Rias, Searsex said, his voice warm but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. You've had a rather eventful day. His gaze shifted to Naruto, his smile never wavering, but his eyes sharpened, analyzing. Probing. The casual observer would see a friendly greeting. Naruto saw a king assessing a nuclear weapon that had just appeared in his backyard. Brother, father, mother, Rias said, bowing respectfully. This is Naruto Uzumaki. He is a new friend. Mr. Uzumaki. Lord Zeoticus Gremory stepped forward, his expression a mask of political cordiality. Your victory over Riser Phoenix is the talk of the underworld. A truly unprecedented event. You have, for better or worse, made a name for yourself in a single afternoon. Naruto met the older devil's gaze. He could see the shrewd mind working behind the polite facade, the endless calculations of risk and opportunity. The fight was his idea. I just finished it. The simple, blunt statement seemed to disarm them for a moment. They were used to posturing, to veiled threats and honeyed words. This directness was something new. Indeed, Sirzek said, his smile becoming a little more genuine. Which is why this has become such a delicate situation. The Phoenix clan is demanding censure. Their allies in the old Satan faction are screaming for your head, calling you a terrorist who assaulted the heir of a noble house. He gestured for them to walk. We are holding a reception this evening. Many of the heads of the great houses will be present. They are eager to meet the one who humbled an immortal. It was not an invitation. It was a command. Naruto was to be put on display, to be judged and measured by the sharks of the underworld's political waters. Hours later, Naruto stood on a balcony overlooking a grand ballroom. He had been given a simple, dark tunic and trousers to replace his tattered jumpsuit. Below, hundreds of high-ranking devils mingled, their power and prestige a tangible force in the air. They drank wine the color of blood and conversed in low, conspiratorial tones, their eyes constantly flicking up to where he stood. He was the main attraction, the beast in the cage. Rias appeared at his side, dressed in a stunning crimson gown that drew the eye of every male in the room. She looked like the princess she was, but her expression was tense. "They're all here," she murmured. "The houses that supported my engagement to Riser. They see you as an obstacle, a threat to the pure blood doctrine." "Let them look," Naruto said, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. He could feel their animosity. A sea of negative intent washing over him. It was nothing new. He had stood before entire villages that hated him, that saw him as a monster. This was just a more well-dressed version of the same old story. Fear is a tool. They can fear me. It will keep them from doing something stupid. It might also provoke them into doing something stupid, Rias countered, her voice worried. You don't understand their pride. To them, bloodline is everything. You, an outsider with no name and no history, have shattered that belief. You've shown them that an individual can be more powerful than a legacy. They can't forgive that. Their conversation was cut short as Lord Gremory and Sirzek approached them. It is time, Sirzek said, his expression somber. They have demanded you. Present yourself and answer for your actions. Naruto followed them down to the ballroom floor. As they descended the grand staircase, a hush fell over the crowd. All conversation stopped. Hundreds of pairs of eyes, ancient and predatory, fixed on him. The pressure was immense, a psychic weight meant to crush a lesser being. Naruto walked through it as if it were a light spring breeze. An elderly devil with a long, gray beard and the sigil of a minor but respected house stepped forward, his face a mask of indignation. Sirzek-sama, you honor this thing, with your presence. He has assaulted Lord Phoenix. He has spat upon our traditions. He must be punished. A chorus of agreement rippled through the room. Naruto stopped at the bottom of the stairs, facing the assembly. He didn't wait for Sirzek or Rias to defend him. He took the initiative. I assaulted no one, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the cavernous hall. Riser Phoenix challenged me to a duel in a pocket dimension of his own creation. He set the terms. He lost. If your traditions are so fragile that they can be shattered by one man accepting a challenge, then your traditions are weak and not worth preserving. The sheer audacity of his statement struck the room dumb. You are an outsider, another lord shouted. You have no right to speak of our ways. I have the right of any warrior, Naruto countered, his voice hardening. The right to defend myself. The right to answer a challenge. Rias Gremory was being forced into a marriage she did not want, for political gain. Her feelings, her will, were considered irrelevant. You speak of tradition, but I see only weakness. A system that sacrifices the happiness of its own for the sake of a name is a system on the verge of collapse. He took a step forward, his golden slitted eyes sweeping over them, pinning them in place. You want to know who I am? I am Naruto Uzumaki. I am the one who showed you that your precious bloodlines mean nothing in the face of true power. And I am Rias Gremory's protector. If you have a problem with that, you have a problem with me. The tension in the room was so thick it was a physical force. He had not just defied them. He had insulted their entire way of life. He had called them weak. It was an unforgivable offense. It was then that the attack came. It wasn't an explosion or a grand spell. It was a subtle, insidious wave of magic that washed over a 30-foot radius in the center of the hall, centered on Naruto and the most vocal of his detractors. A sphere of absolute silence descended, cutting them off from the rest of the ballroom. At the same time, the magical energy within the sphere went haywire, disrupting any attempt to cast a complex spell. From the shadows beneath the balconies, a dozen figures in black, form-fitting armor dropped to the floor, silent as death. They moved with the terrifying efficiency of elite assassins, their faces hidden behind demonic masks. Each one held a short blade that glowed with a sickly purple light, devil-slaying magic, a forbidden art. Their target was not just Naruto. Their targets were the elder devils who had been arguing with him, key members of houses who, while conservative, were loyal to Sears. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a politically motivated purge, designed to be blamed on the mysterious outsider. The devils in the sphere panicked, their powers flickering and dying under the disruption field. The assassins moved in for the kill. But the assassins had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had assumed Naruto was a creature of grand, flashy power like Riser. They had no idea he was, first and foremost, a shinobi. In the silent, chaotic bubble, Naruto was a phantom. While the other devils were still reeling from the magical disruption, he was already in motion. An assassin lunged at the elderly devil who had first spoken out. A blur of movement, and Naruto was there, his hand chopping down on the assassin's wrist, shattering the bone and sending the glowing blade skittering across the floor. He didn't stop. A spinning kick connected with the assassin's temple, sending him crashing to the marble floor, unconscious. Another assassin aimed for Lord Gremory's back. Naruto was suddenly behind him, one hand grabbing the back of his mask, the other delivering a precise, paralyzing strike to a nerve cluster in his neck. The assassin went rigid and collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. It was not a fight. It was a masterclass in efficiency. He moved between the assassins like a ghost, a whirlwind of precise, debilitating strikes. He broke arms, dislocated shoulders, shattered kneecaps. He didn't kill any of them, but he dismantled the attack with a terrifying, brutal grace. The entire engagement, from the moment the assassins appeared to the moment the last one was lying groaning on the floor, took less than 5 seconds. The silence barrier shattered. The sounds of the ballroom rushed back in. A cacophony of shocked gasps and cries of alarm. The devils who had been outside the bubble stared at the scene of carnage. A dozen elite assassins, neutralized. The elders they had been targeting, untouched. And Naruto, standing in the middle of it all, not even breathing hard. He had single-handedly protected the very people who had been calling for his head moments before. Sears and Graphia were at the edge of the scene in an instant, their own power flaring to life. Graphia waved a hand, and the masks of the defeated assassins dissolved, revealing the faces of devils from the House of Astaroth. A family notorious for its support of the old Satan faction. The political calculus of the evening shifted in a heartbeat. The old Satan faction had overplayed their hand. Their TTEMPT to frame Naruto and eliminate political rivals had been exposed, revealing their treachery to the entire underworld elite. Naruto looked at Lord Gremory, who was staring at him with a new, deeply complex expression. The shrewd politician was gone, replaced by a man who had been seconds from death and had been saved by the very being he was plotting against. Sears Lucifer stepped into the center of the cleared space. His warm smile gone, replaced by the cold, absolute authority of a king. The House of Astaroth has committed an act of high treason, he declared, his voice booming with power that made the entire palace tremble. And this man, he pointed to Naruto, has just saved the lives of several esteemed members of this assembly, including my own father. It seems we owe you a debt of gratitude, Naruto Uzumaki. He turned to the silent, stunned crowd. Let it be known, from this day forward, that Naruto Uzumaki is a guest of the House of Gremory and under the personal protection of the Devil King, Lucifer. Any who move against him will be considered an enemy of the state. The declaration was a political earthquake. In one night, Naruto had gone from an unknown anomaly to a figure of controversy and now to a protected, if contentious, ally of the ruling faction. He had walked into the snake pit, and through a combination of blunt honesty and overwhelming competence. He had emerged with the snakes either cowed or dead. He met Rias's gaze from across the room. Her face was a brilliant canvas of relief, pride, and an emotion he was beginning to recognize more and more. She had stood by him, ready to fight for him. Their bargain, struck in a quiet clubhouse, had been forged anew in the fires of political intrigue. They were allies. They were partners. And in the dark, dangerous world of devils, that was a bond more precious than any bloodline. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Date with Destiny. The political firestorm Naruto had ignited in the ballroom eventually burned itself out, leaving behind a landscape of charred alliances and new, grudging respect. The old Satan faction had been exposed, their agents captured and their treachery laid bare for all to see. Searzek's declaration had solidified Naruto's position, transforming him from a dangerous anomaly into a protected, if volatile, asset. But the victory felt hollow, a strategic win in a game Naruto had never wanted to play. He stood on a balcony of the Gremory Palace, the crimson sky of the underworld stretching out before him like a sea of spilled wine. The air was cool, carrying the faint, metallic scent of magic. Below, the last of the guests from the disastrous reception were departing in flashes of teleportation magic, their hushed whispers and sideways glances a testament to the night's upheaval. "They're afraid of you now," a soft voice said from beside him. Rias had appeared at his side, her formal gown exchanged for a simple, comfortable dress. The regal mask of the Gremory heiress was gone, replaced by a look of weary relief. "You didn't just win a fight. You humiliated a noble house, exposed a conspiracy, and saved the lives of the very people who wanted you gone. In one night, you've become both a hero and a boogeyman to the entire underworld." Naruto didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the alien horizon. "They can think what they want. I didn't do it for them. I know," she said quietly. "Thank you, Naruto." The words were simple, but they carried a weight of sincerity that cut through the political noise. He finally turned to her, his golden slitted eyes etching the soft light of the floating globes. "I told you I was your protector. It's a promise." They stood in a comfortable silence for a long moment, the chaos of the past few days settling around them. He was a soldier without a war, a king without a kingdom, adrift in a world he didn't understand. She was a princess in a gilded cage, her every move dictated by duty and politics. In that shared moment of quiet, they were just two people, burdened by power and searching for a foothold. "You've been through a lot," Rias said, her voice soft. "First the fight with the fallen, then Riser, now this. You haven't had a moment's peace since you arrived." She hesitated, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "I want to get away from all of this." She gestured vaguely at the palace, at the crimson sky, at the weight of their titles. "Let's go back to the human world. Just for a day. No peerage, no politics. Just us." Naruto looked at her, surprised. The idea was so foreign, so normal. He didn't remember the last time he had done something that wasn't part of a mission or a life or death struggle. A day of peace felt like a luxury he had never been afforded. "A date?" he asked, the word feeling clumsy on his tongue. Rias's blush deepened, but she didn't back down. "Yes," she said, her blue-green eyes meeting his. "A date." A small, genuine smile touched Naruto's lips. "Okay." The transition from the underworld to Kuo Town was as jarring as ever. One moment they were surrounded by the Gothic spires of the Gremory domain, the next they were standing on a bustling street corner under a brilliant blue sky. The sounds of traffic, the chatter of students walking home from school, the smell of street food, it was a sensory overload of normalcy. For Naruto, it was a painful reminder of the home he had lost. The architecture, the language, the faces, it was all so similar, yet fundamentally different. A home that looked like his, but wasn't. Rias seemed to sense his melancholy. Without a word, she gently took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. The simple act of touch was a grounding force, pulling him from the ghost of his past into the reality of his present. He looked down at their joined hands, then at her, and gave a grateful nod. "So," he said, his voice a little rough, "what do people do on these dates?" Rias's bright, mischievous smile returned. "I have a few ideas." Her first idea was an arcade. It was a cacophony of flashing lights, synthesized music, and the shouts of teenagers. Naruto, who had never seen anything like it, was initially overwhelmed. But Rias, with a competitive glint in her eye, dragged him from game to game. She was surprisingly fierce at a fighting game, but her refined upbringing was no match for a lifetime of actual combat experience. Naruto's reflexes, now amplified to a supernatural degree, were in a different league. He saw the patterns, the tells, the openings in the game's code as if they were a real opponent. He achieved a perfect victory, much to her pouting annoyance. To make it up to her, he took her to a crane game. After watching her fail a few times, he stepped up. He didn't see it as a game of chance. He saw it as a problem of physics and timing. He focused, his senses mapping the precise weight of the stuffed animal, the tension of the claw, the timing of the mechanism. On his first try, the claw descended with surgical precision, grabbing a small, fluffy cat and depositing it neatly in the chute. He handed it to her, and the brilliant, genuine smile she gave him was more valuable than any victory. They spent hours like that, moving from one simple pleasure to the next. They shared a crepe from a street vendor, watched a terrible action movie where Naruto quietly critiqued the fight choreography, and simply walked through the crowded streets, two anonymous people in a sea of humanity. For the first time, Naruto felt the immense, crushing weight on his shoulders begin to lighten. He wasn't the Dragon Emperor, the hero of the Fourth Great War. He was just Naruto, and Rias wasn't the Gremory heiress or a devil king. She was just Rias, a girl with a beautiful laugh who got unreasonably angry when she lost at air hockey. As the afternoon wore on, the smell of broth and roasting pork drew them to a small, unassuming ramen stand tucked into a side alley. It was a place Naruto would have found by scent alone, a beacon of hope in a foreign land. They took 2 seats at the worn wooden counter. 2 bowls of miso ramen, extra pork. Naruto ordered without even looking at the menu, the words a familiar, comforting ritual. The old man behind the counter grunted in acknowledgement. As he worked, the familiar, rhythmic sounds of the kitchen, the slosh of noodles in boiling water, the sharp P of scallions, transported Naruto back in time. "You really like this stuff, don't you?" Rias asked, amused. "It's the food of the gods," Naruto said with a deadpan seriousness that made her laugh. "I grew up on it. There was a place, Ichiraku Ramen. The old man who ran it and his daughter were 2 of the first people in my village who ever treated me like I was a person." The casual way he said it, the deep well of loneliness hidden beneath the simple statement, silenced her. She saw a flicker of the lonely child on the swing, the outcast everyone whispered about. "Because of the power inside you?" she asked gently. He nodded, staring at the steam rising from the pots. "Yeah, for a long time, it was just me and him. Kurama, the 9-tailed fox. He was a being of pure hatred, sealed inside me at birth. Everyone saw me as the monster, not the jailer." He picked up his chopsticks, turning them over in his fingers. "It took a long time, a lot of fights, to finally become friends. In the end, he was my closest friend. He died to save me in our last battle." Rias reached out, her hand covering his on the counter. "I'm sorry, Naruto. I can't imagine what that must have been like." "It's okay," he said, though the ache in his chest was still raw. "The bonds I made with my other friends, my teachers, they're what saved me. Iruka-sensei, Kakashi-sensei, Sakura, Sasuke, even when he was trying to kill me." He chuckled, a sad, distant sound. "That's all I ever wanted. To be acknowledged, to have people I could protect." Rias tightened her grip on his hand. She finally understood. His obsession with protecting her and her peerage, his unwavering stance against a system that treated people like pieces on a board, it was all born from a childhood of profound isolation. He fought for others because, for so long, no one had fought for him. "I understand the feeling," she said softly, "of being seen as a title instead of a person." Now it was his turn to listen. "Everyone sees the Gremory name," she continued, her voice losing its usual confident edge. "They see the power, the prestige. They see my brother, the Devil King. They expect me to be just like him. To be a perfect leader, a brilliant strategist. To uphold the family honor. My engagement to Riser, it had nothing to do with me. It was a political contract to unite two pure-blooded houses. My feelings were never part of the equation. She looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. This is the first time in so long that I've felt free. That I've just been me. The ramen arrived, hot and fragrant, but for a moment, neither of them moved. In the quiet intimacy of the ramen stand, surrounded by the steam and the scent of home, they had found the common ground of their gilded cages. He, the container of a monster, and she, the bearer of a legacy. Both of them were defined by the power they held, and both longed to be seen for who they were underneath it all. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the town, they found themselves in a quiet park overlooking a small lake. The sky was a brilliant canvas of orange, pink, and purple. They sat on a bench, the stuffed cat from the arcade resting between them. The playful energy of the day had softened into a comfortable, intimate silence. "Thank you for today, Naruto," Rias said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "It felt natural, right? I needed this." "Me too," he admitted, his voice a low rumble. He hesitated for only a second before wrapping his arm around her, pulling her closer. She fit perfectly against his side. The lone lines that had been his constant companion since arriving in this world receded, pushed back by the simple warmth of her presence. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something he had thought he'd lost forever: hope. Hope for a future, for a new beginning, for new bonds to fill the void of the ones he had lost. They sat like that for a long time, watching the colors of the sky deepen into twilight. The world was quiet, peaceful. It was a perfect moment. And then it was shattered. The air went ice cold. An oppressive, holy pressure slammed down on the park, snuffing out the sounds of the city like a blanket. The birds went silent. The gentle breeze died. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, pulling Rias behind him, his body a shield. The peaceful man from the ramen stand was gone, replaced by the lethal warrior. His eyes scanned the deepening shadows, the golden slits glowing with a dangerous light. "Well, well," a voice, cold and righteous, echoed from the heavens. "The abomination and its devil whore. Enjoying a moment of peace. How utterly blasphemous." They descended from the twilight sky on wings of pure white light, their forms blocking out the last of the setting sun. There were at least 24 of them. Clad in shining silver armor, their faces hidden behind expressionless golden masks. They were angels, but the aura they projected was not one of peace or love. It was one of cold, zealous fury. In their hands, they held spears and swords made of solidified holy light, each one a death sentence for a devil. The leader, a tall angel with 4 wings instead of 2, landed gracefully before them. His mask was more ornate than the others, and the power rolling off him was immense. "Naruto Uzumaki," the angel declared, his voice devoid of any warmth. "A mortal who has stolen the power of a divine dragon. You are a perversion of the natural order, a disruption to the great balance. We are the fist of heaven, and we have come to correct this mistake. We detect your power when you dispatched the fallen," the angel continued. "We have been observing you, waiting for an opportunity. To see you consorting with this filth," he gestured dismissively at Rias, "only confirms your corruption. By the authority of the seraphim, I sentence you to purification." Rias trembled behind Naruto. The sheer concentration of holy power in the air was physically painful to her, like standing in a bonfire. Naruto didn't look back at her. His focus was entirely on the enemy. He had let his guard down. He had allowed himself a single day of peace, and in doing so, he had led Rias directly into a trap. A cold, silent rage, deeper and more terrifying than any he had felt before, began to build within him. They had threatened Rias. They had tried to take this one perfect day away from him. They had made a fatal mistake. He took a half step forward, planting his feet. The ground beneath him cracked. A low growl, more draconic than human, rumbled in his chest as a shimmering golden aura of unimaginable power began to bleed from his skin, pushing back against the holy pressure of the angels. "You wanted my attention," he said, his voice a low, deadly promise of the violence to come. "You've got it." Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Heaven's Wrath. The golden aura bleeding from Naruto's skin was a visible declaration of war. It was not the hot, arrogant fire of Rias Phoenix, nor the cold, corrupting energy of a devil. It was the raw, untamed power of creation itself, a force so primal that it made the very air sing. The holy pressure of the angelic squadron buckled against it, the oppressive sanctimony meeting an unyielding wall of pure life. The lead angel, Barakiel, tilted his head, his featureless golden mask betraying no emotion. A defiant roar from an unnatural beast. It is a fitting end. You will be the first sacrifice in the purification of this tainted world. He raised his sword of light, its tip glowing with the intensity of a miniature sun. For the glory of heaven, and the preservation of the balance, eradicate them. The angels moved as one, a symphony of disciplined violence. 12 of them shot forward, their movements perfectly synchronized, creating a cage of holy light around Naruto and Rias. Spears of light rained down, not in a chaotic volley, but in a precise, interlocking pattern designed to leave no path for escape. Rias cried out, a sharp intake of breath as the concentrated holy energy washed over her. It felt like being flayed by invisible razors, her demonic nature recoiling from the sacred assault. Naruto didn't waste a breath on words. He slammed his palm onto the ground. A dome of solid, shimmering gold erupted from the earth, enclosing them completely. It was not a ninja technique, it was a pure act of will, happing the draconic energy that now flowed through him like blood. The spears of light hammered against the dome, creating a cacophony like 1,000 striking bells. Cracks spider-webbed across the golden surface, the holy power eating away at the divine construct. Stay behind me, Naruto ordered, his voice a low growl. He didn't need to look to know that Rias was weakened, that this fight was 100 times more dangerous for her than it was for him. He could feel her pain as a sharp sting in the back of his own mind. The dome shattered, exploding into a shower of golden dust. The angels, anticipating this, were already moving, swinging their light swords in wide, sweeping arcs meant to cleave them in two. But Naruto was already gone. He moved with a speed that defied physics, a golden blur weaving through the deadly web of light. To the angels, it was as if he had teleported, but Rias, whose senses were attuned to magic, could see the truth. He was simply moving so fast that he iced it in the spaces between their attacks, flowing through the battle like water through a net. He appeared behind 2 of the angels, his hands a blur. A precise chop to the back of one's neck, a palm heel strike to the base of the other's skull. There was no wasted motion, no flashy technique. It was the brutal, efficient taijutsu of a man who had survived a war. The 2 angels dropped from the sky like stones, their armor clattering against the scorched earth, unconscious before they hit the ground. He didn't stop. He used the body of a falling angel as a springboard, launching himself toward another, grabbing him by the wings and using his momentum to hurl him into 2 of his comrades. The resulting tangle of limbs and holy light sent all 3 crashing into the boiling waters of the lake. Disgusting. Barakiel roared from above, his voice booming with righteous fury. You fight like a cornered animal, without honor or grace. Honor is a luxury for people who aren't trying to kill the person you care about. Naruto shot back, his voice cold. He landed softly on the ground, placing himself once again between the remaining angels and Rias. In less than 30 seconds, he had out half of their squadron without sustaining a single scratch. Barakiel descended, his 4 wings beating a slow, powerful rhythm that stirred the air into a vortex. The sheer pressure of his presence dwarfed that of his subordinates. Your power is an affront. It reeks of the first worm, the beast who dared to shape the void into creation. That power does not belong in the hands of a filthy mortal. He leveled his sword at Naruto. I, Barakiel, captain of the Seraphim's Fist, will perform this purification myself. He lunged. His speed was on another level entirely, a streak of white and gold that almost matched Naruto's own. Their first clash was a thunderclap of raw power. Naruto blocked the sword of light with his forearm, his skin glowing with a thick layer of golden, draconic energy. The holy blade sizzled against it, but could not break through. The duel was a whirlwind of motion. Barakiel's swordsmanship was flawless, a dance of divine wrath honed over millennia. Each strike was aimed with perfect precision, designed to sever, to purge, to annihilate. But Naruto's movements were fluid, instinctual, unpredictable. He was not a swordsman. He was a brawler, a survivor. He parried a strike with his elbow, dodged another by a hair's breadth, and countered with a savage kick aimed at Barakiel's knee. The park became their arena. The ground shattered under their feet. Trees were vaporized by stray blasts of holy energy. The remaining angels kept their distance, forming a perimeter to ensure Rias could not escape, their faces grim behind their golden masks. "Why are you doing this?" Naruto grunted, locking arms with the angelic captain, their combined strength cracking the very stones beneath them. "We have no quarrel with you. You are the quarrel." Barakiel strained, his voice tight with fanatical conviction. "The Great Seal weakens. The sleeper, the chaos that was bound before time, begins to stir in its prison. Its whispers corrupt the greedy and the weak. We have seen the signs, prophecies failing, the flow of souls becoming erratic. Your sudden appearance, this untamed, primordial power you wield, is not a coincidence. You are a catalyst, a crack in the dam that holds back the endless dark." Quote. His words struck Naruto with the force of a physical blow. The sleeper. It was the same entity from his vision, the waking eye of chaos. This zealous angel wasn't just a random fanatic. He was responding to the same threat Naruto had felt. "And your solution is to attack anyone you don't understand," Naruto roared, shoving Barakiel back. "That's not preservation, it's madness. It is necessity," Barakiel countered, raising his sword to the heavens. It blazed with a light so bright it was blinding. "We will purge all taints from this world, devil, fallen, and dragon alike. We will present a pure, unblemished creation to the Lord, so that it may be spared when the true enemy awakens. There is no room for shades of gray in the coming war. There is only light and shadow. Now, be cleansed." He brought the sword down. A colossal pillar of holy fire, 100 feet wide, descended from the sky, aimed not just at Naruto, but at the entire area where he and Rias stood. It was an attack meant to sterilize, to leave nothing but sanctified ash. Rias watched, her eyes wide with terror. She tried to summon her power of destruction, but her body was racked with pain. Her demonic energy sputtering in the face of such overwhelming holy might. Naruto looked at the descending pillar of annihilation, then back at Rias's pale, strained face. The cold rage within him finally ignited, burning away reason, leaving only a single, absolute imperative: protect her. "Enough of this," he whispered. He didn't try to block or dodge. He met the attack head-on. He raised his right hand, and the world seemed to hold its breath. A sphere of violent, incandescent gold spun into existence above his palm. It was the Ryujin Rasengan, but it was different this time. It was larger, more unstable, tendrils of pure creation energy lashing out from it like solar flares. He didn't throw it, he thrust it upward, into the heart of the descending holy fire. The moment the two attacks met, reality seemed to tear. There was no explosion, only a deafening silence as the two opposing forces annihilated each other. The golden sphere of creation ground against the pillar of holy purification. Light of every conceivable color erupted from the point of impact, and a shockwave of pure force flattened every tree for a mile in every direction. When the light faded, Naruto was still standing, his arm raised. His clothes shredded, smoke rising from his skin. The pillar of holy fire was gone, completely unmade. Barakiel stared, his invisible jaw slack behind his mask. He erased it. The other angels were frozen in shock. That attack should have been absolute. Naruto lowered his arm, his breathing heavy. His body ached. The power he was wielding was immense, and his newly forged soul was still learning how to contain it. But the fight wasn't over. Rias was still in danger. "You talked about the power of the first worm," Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet as he looked up at Barakiel. "You have no idea." He let go. He stopped holding back, stopped trying to contain the infinite ocean of power within him. He opened the floodgates. A roar, not from his mouth but from his very soul, erupted across the battlefield. It was an ancient, terrifying sound, the cry of a celestial dragon that had once shaken the foundations of reality. The golden aura around him exploded outward, a tsunami of divine pressure. The remaining rank and file angels cried out as their swords and spears of light flickered and died, their holy energy snuffed out by the sheer dominance of his presence. Faint, intricate golden patterns, like draconic scales, momentarily appeared on his skin, glowing with an inner light. His eyes were no longer just slitted, they were blazing golden suns. He didn't form a sphere of energy. He gathered the power in his lungs, He took a deep breath, and the air for 100 yards around him was sucked into a vortex in front of his mouth. Barakiel's zealous certainty finally broke, replaced by a flicker of primal fear. What is this? Naruto exhaled. What came out was not fire or wind. It was a torrent of pure, golden energy, a celesti. Al Dragon's breath that was the antithesis of the holy fire. It was not a beam. It was a wave, a wide, unstoppable river of creation energy that washed across the battlefield. It didn't burn or destroy. It undid. The ground it touched was not scorched, but reverted to primordial, glowing energy for a moment before reforming. The boiling lake hissed and steamed, its heat instantly neutralized. The angels caught in the blast didn't scream. Their silver armor dissolved, their bodies were bathed in the golden light, and their connection to heaven was violently, temporarily severed. They collapsed to the ground, unconscious, their wings fading into motes of light. Barakiel met the blast with a desperate cross guard of his sword, pouring every ounce of his holy power into a barrier. The wave struck him, and his barrier shattered like glass. He was thrown backward, tumbling through the air for half a mile before crashing into the side of a distant office building with enough force to crack the concrete. The wave of energy dissipated, leaving behind a profound, ringing silence. The park was a wasteland, a smoking crater under the twilight sky. Every angel in the squadron was down, unconscious and powerless. The golden light around Naruto receded, the draconic patterns fading from his skin. The immense power retreated back into the depths of his soul, leaving him panting, the adrenaline beginning to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. He stumbled for a moment, then caught himself. He turned, his first and only thought for Rias. She was still standing where he'd left her, her hands covering her mouth. Her eyes wide with a mixture of terror, relief, and utter, soul-shaking awe. He limped toward her, the last of his strength focused on closing the distance. "Are you okay?" he managed to ask. She didn't answer with words. She ran to him, throwing her arms around him, holding on as if she was afraid he would disappear. He grunted in pain as she inadvertently pressed against his bruised ribs. But he didn't care. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight, burying his face in her crimson hair, breathing in her scent. She was safe. That was all that mattered. From the shattered side of the distant building, a wounded and broken Barakiel pulled himself from the rubble. He stared across the devastation at the two figures embracing in the center of the crater. He had failed. He had come to purge an abomination and had instead been swatted aside like an insect. With a final, hate-filled glare, he gathered the last of his strength, and his remaining wing flared with light. He vanished in a flash, retreating to lick his wounds and report his catastrophic failure. The battle was over, but as Naruto held Rias in the ruins of their peaceful day, he knew the war was just beginning. They had not just defeated a rogue faction. They had declared war on a piece of heaven itself. The consequences of this day would be swift, and they would be severe. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Underworld's Judgment. The aftermath of the battle was a crater of smoking earth and deafening silence. The holy energy had dissipated, but the raw, primal scent of Naruto's draconic power still clung to the air. A testament to the cataclysm that had occurred. Rias clung to him, the tremors of adrenaline and fear slowly subsiding, replaced by the solid, reassuring reality of his presence. He was hurt, exhausted. But he was there. He was real. The sound of a teleportation circle ripped through the quiet. A familiar, elegant Gremory sigil appeared, and from it stepped Graphia Lucifuge, followed by a squad of heavily armed Gremory guards. Her impassive face broke its usual composure, her violet eyes widening as she took in the scale of the devastation. A park, a lake, several city blocks, all had been transformed into a wasteland. Rias Ajosama. Graphia's voice was tight with urgency. Lord Searzex detected a massive energy spike, both holy and something other. "Are you harmed?" Her gaze fell on Naruto, who was still supporting a trembling Rias. She saw the shredded clothes, the rising smoke from his skin, the profound exhaustion in his posture. And she felt the lingering echo of the power he had unleashed. It was a power that made the very soul of a devil, even one as powerful as herself, quail in primal fear. "We were ambushed," Rias said, her voice shaky but firm. She pulled away from Naruto, though she kept a hand on his arm to steady him. Angels. A squadron. They called themselves the Fist of Heaven. Graphia's expression turned grim. So it has begun. We had received intelligence that a zealous faction in heaven was becoming active, but we never imagined they would make such a bold move in the human world. She looked at the unconscious, inged forms of the angelic soldiers scattered across the crater. You did this? She asked Naruto, her tone a mixture of disbelief and awe. Naruto simply nodded, too tired for a lengthy explanation. This changes everything, Graphia stated, her mind already calculating the political ramifications. An attack on the Gremory heiress by an official, if rogue, faction of heaven is an act of war. And you, Naruto Uzumaki, are at the center of it. She raised a hand to a communication device in her ear. This is Graphia. The situation is contained. Ojo-sama is safe. The perpetrators were angelic. End a cleanup and memory wipe crew for a 5-mile radius. And prepare the council chamber in Lilith. Lord Lucifer will be convening an emergency session of the 4 Satans. Immediately, her orders were given with chilling efficiency. Within minutes, the area was swarming with devils in specialized gear, erasing memories, repairing damage with illusionary magic, and taking the unconscious angels into custody. Naruto and Rias were whisked into another teleportation circle before they could even protest. The destination this time was not the Gremory Palace, but a place of far greater authority. They materialized in an antechamber of stark, black obsidian, the air humming with an ancient, oppressive power. This was Lilith, the capital city of the underworld, the seat of its government. Sears Lucifer was waiting for them, his usual gentle smile replaced by a look of grave seriousness. He was flanked by the other 3 great Satans, the impossibly beautiful and powerful Seraphal Leviathan, her playful demeanor gone. The stern, militaristic Ajuka Beelzebub, his mind already dissecting the reports flooding in, and the hulking, imposing Falbium Asmodeus, who seemed, for once, wide awake and alert. Rias, Sears said, his voice cutting straight to the point. Report. Rias, her composure fully restored, gave a concise, accurate account of the ambush, from the appearance of Barak IEL to his fanatical speech about the sleeper, and the purification, culminating in Naruto's overwhelming counterattack. As she spoke, the 4 most powerful devils in existence studied Naruto with an intensity that could peel the soul from a lesser being. He met their gazes without flinching, his exhaustion warring with his defiant pride. He had done what was necessary to protect Rias. He would not apologize for it. When Rias finished, a heavy silence filled the chamber. It was Ajuka Beelzebub, the master strategist and creator of the evil peace system, who spoke first. The power you cried, to nullify an attack of that magnitude and then defeat a Seraph-class captain and his entire squadron, it is beyond any scale we have recorded. It is not demonic, nor holy, nor draconic in the way we understand it. It is something foundational. It's the power of a god, Seraphal Leviathan whispered, her usual cheerful persona stripped away to reveal the ancient, powerful being beneath. Quote, and he just used it to declare war on heaven on our doorstep. This is a disaster. Falbium Asmodeus rumbled, his deep voice shaking the chamber. The peace between the factions is a lie held together by string and wishful thinking. A direct confrontation between a being of this power and a seraphim captain, heaven cannot let this stand. They will demand retribution. They will demand him. All eyes turned to Naruto. He was no longer a guest or a curiosity. He was the fulcrum upon which the fate of the 3 factions now rested. He was a walking, breathing catalyst for a war the underworld could not afford to fight. What he did to protect my sister, Sears stated, his voice a low, dangerous calm. The Gremory family, and I as Lucifer, will not forget that. However, his gaze hardened. The fact remains that your very existence, Naruto Uzumaki, now threatens the stability of our entire world. The council has been convened to decide what is to be done with you. Rias stepped forward, her eyes blazing. Decide. There is nothing to decide. He saved my life. He is our ally. He is a weapon of unknown origin and uncontrollable power that has just painted a target on all of our backs. Ajuka countered, his tone sharp and logical. We have 2 choices. We can hand him over to heaven to appease them and hope to avoid a war. Or, we can claim him as our own, declare him an asset of the underworld, and prepare for the inevitable conflict. There is no third option. The chamber became a pressure cooker of political maneuvering and ideological conflict. Serafal argued passionately for protecting Naruto, seeing a kindred spirit in his desire to protect his loved ones. Falbium, ever the pragmatist, argued for the path of least resistance, sacrificing the pawn to save the kingdom. Ajuka remained neutral, outlining the strategic benefits and consequences of each path with cold, detached logic. Naruto listened to them debate his fate, a familiar, bitter taste in his mouth. He was once again the demon fox in the cage, a weapon to be pointed or a threat to be contained. Rias stood by his side, arguing fiercely in his defense, her loyalty unwavering. But he could see the strain on Sirzek's face. He was not just Rias's brother, he was a king, responsible for billions of lives. Finally, Naruto had heard enough. "You're all missing the point," he said, his voice cutting through their debate like a kunai. The four Satans stopped, turning to him in surprise. "You're talking about me like I'm a storm that just appeared on your horizon," he continued, taking a step forward into the center of the chamber. His exhaustion was still evident, but his will was a fire that could not be quenched. "You're debating whether to board up the windows or try to fly a kite in a hurricane. You haven't once considered that the storm might have a mind of its own." He met Sirzek's gaze directly. The angel, Barakil, he wasn't just a zealot. He was terrified. He spoke of a sleeper, a chaos, bound before time. He said its whispers were driving people mad. "I saw it, in a vision, an eye opening in the darkness. It's the same enemy my predecessor, the one whose power I now hold, died to seal away." He swept his gaze over all of them, his voice ringing with an authority that had nothing to do with titles or lineage. "You're preparing for the wrong war. You're worried about fighting heaven, when the real enemy is a cosmic horror that wants to unmake your entire reality. This isn't about factions anymore. It's about survival." His words hung in the air, shifting the entire context of their debate. He wasn't just a weapon. He was a messenger, a harbinger of a threat they had long forgotten. "The legends of the Trihexa, the apocalyptic beast," Falbium murmured, his eyes wide. "We thought them mere myths. Cautionary tales. Some myths are warnings," Naruto said. It was then that one of the other Satans, a lesser-known but powerful Marquis who had been observing the proceedings from the side, stepped forward. He was a devil named Dantalion, known for his vast knowledge and quiet, scholarly demeanor. "A fascinating theory, to be sure," Dantalion said with a smooth, oily smile. "To deflect from your own culpability by inventing a common, unseen enemy. A clever political maneuver, but we cannot base the policy of the entire underworld on the ravings of a zealot and the convenient visions of an outsider." He turned to the four Satans. "This being is an unknown, a variable we cannot control. His actions have brought us to the brink of war. The logical, the safest course of action is to contain him. To strip him of this dangerous power and hand him over to heaven as a gesture of peace. It is the only way to guarantee our security." A murmur of agreement went through some of the other assembled lords. Dantalion's argument was cowardly, but it was also seductive. It promised a return to the status quo. Rias opened her mouth to argue, but Sirzek held up a hand. He looked at Naruto, his expression unreadable. "He raises a valid point. Your power is a threat. How can we be sure you won't turn it on us, should our interests diverge?" Naruto looked at Sirzek, then at Dantalion. He could feel a subtle wrongness emanating from the scholarly devil, a faint, discordant note hidden beneath his smooth words. It was the same oily, unclean feeling he had sensed from the stray devil in the forest, but 1,000 times more faint, more cunningly hidden. It was the faintest whisper of chaos. He knew then that this was not a debate. It was a trial. And he had to win it not with words, but with a demonstration of who he was. "You want to know if I'm a threat," Naruto said, his voice dropping low. "You want to know if you can trust me." He turned his back on the four Satans. A move of such profound disrespect that the guards in the chamber tensed, their hands flying to their weapons. He walked directly toward Marquis Dantalion. "You speak of security," Naruto said, his voice calm as he stopped a foot in front of the smaller devil. "But your words, they don't promote security. They promote fear, division. They seek to turn allies against each other, right when they need to be united." He looked Dantalion in the eye. "Tell me, Marquis, Why would a loyal servant of the underworld want that? Dantalian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I am merely counseling caution. As is my duty. No, Naruto said, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Dantalian could hear. You're a mouthpiece. I can feel it on you. The faintest stink of the enemy you're so quick to dismiss. Before Dantalian could react, Naruto's hand shot out. He didn't strike. He simply placed his open palm on the Marquise's chest. A soft, golden light emanated from his hand, a gentle, purifying warmth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Dantalian's eyes widened in horror. A thin, black smoke, like ink in water, began to seep from his pores. It was a foul, chaotic energy. A corrupting influence that had been subtly twisting his thoughts, amplifying his fears and ambitions. He let out a choked gasp as the golden light forced the corruption out of him. The black smoke coalesced in the air for a moment, forming a fleeting, miniature image of a single, malevolent, waking eye before dissolving into nothingness. Dantalian collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. His eyes clear for the first time in what might have been years. The subtle influence was gone, and he was left staring at the horrifying memory of the decisions it had led him to make. Naruto turned back to the stunned assembly. That is the enemy. It doesn't fight with armies. It whispers. It corrupts. It turns you against each other. It's already here, inside your own walls, sitting on your councils. He looked directly at Searsex. You can hand me over to heaven, and they and the fallen will bicker over what to do with me until the sleeper devours you all. Or you can accept that I am your single greatest weapon in the war that is coming, whether you want it or not. He had laid his cards on the table. The choice was theirs. He was not a supplicant. He was an independent power, offering an alliance. His actions had spoken louder than any political argument. He had saved Rias. He had exposed a traitor. He had revealed the true nature of their enemy. Searsex Lucifer looked at the kneeling, weeping form of Marquis Dantalian. He looked at his sister, who stood by Naruto's side with a look of absolute, unwavering faith. Then he looked at Naruto, at the exhausted but Okayan warrior who had stared down the combined authority of their world and had not yielded an inch. The king of the underworld made his decision. The judgment of this council is rendered, Searsex announced, his voice ringing with finality. Naruto Uzumaki is not a threat to the underworld. He is its guest, its ally, and under my personal, unequivocal protection. We will not hand him over. We will prepare for a new war. A war against the coming darkness. Together. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The first seal breaks. The weight of Searsex. Declaration settled over the obsidian chamber, a final, world-altering judgment. A collective breath was released, a mixture of relief from Rias's faction and stunned disbelief from the others. The debate was over. The outsider was now an ally. Guards moved in on the weeping Marquis Dantalian, hauling him to his feet to be taken for interrogation. The immediate crisis seemed to be averted, the political storm navigated. But the foul taste of the sleeper's influence lingered in the air. A promise of a deeper, more insidious conflict to come. It was in that precise moment of shared relief, that deceptive calm after the storm, that the true enemy made their move. It began not with a bang, but with a low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the very bones of the capital city. The obsidian floor vibrated, a deep, sickening thrum that was felt more than it was heard. The floating globes of light flickered violently, casting long, dancing shadows across the faces of the assembled devils. What is that? Seraphal Leviathan demanded, her playful demeanor vanishing completely, replaced by the sharp, alert posture of a warrior queen. An earthquake. Here. Impossible, Ajuka Beelzebub stated, his eyes already glowing as he processed Athusa. ND streams of data from the city's magical grid. The capital is shielded from all tectonic and magical interference. This is something else. The energy readings they don't make sense. They defy all known laws of thaumaturgy. Naruto felt it not as a vibration, but as a pressure change in his soul. It was the same chaotic, unmaking energy he had purged from Dantalian, magnified a billion times. The faint whisper had become a deafening, world-breaking scream. It's the seal, he said, his voice a low growl that cut through the rising panic. Someone is breaking it. Searsex, head snapped toward the far side of the chamber. his eyes widening in horror as he realized the source of the vibration. The chamber of repose. No. Before he could finish, a wave of incandescent, violet-black energy erupted from a distant part of the palace complex. It was not an explosion of force, but a silent, rolling tide of pure chaos. It washed over Lilith, visible even through the thick obsidian walls as a sickening distortion in reality. The crimson sky outside the windows cracked like shattered glass, revealing glimpses of a formless, writhing void beyond. Buildings of ancient, unbreakable stone groaned and twisted, their geometry warping into impossible, nightmarish shapes. An alarm, a high-pitched, wailing shriek that spoke of a catastrophe-level event, blared through the palace. The doors to the council chamber burst open, and a royal guard, his face a mask of terror, stumbled in. "My lords, the city, it's coming apart. The guards, they're changing. Becoming monsters." He didn't get to finish. His body convulsed, and his form began to melt and reform, his limbs stretching, his face contorting into a mess of screaming mouths and weeping eyes. He became a shrieking abomination of corrupted flesh and magic. With a flick of her wrist, Graphia sent a spear of ice through the creature's head, shattering it into frozen dust. "The corruption is spreading through contact," she yelled, her voice cutting and clear. "Do not let them touch you." Chaos erupted. The assembled lords, the paragons of Devil Society, were thrown into disarray. Some tried to teleport away, only for the magic circles to collapse into screaming vortexes of chaotic energy. Others screamed in terror as the very stone beneath their feet began to writhe and sprout fleshy tendrils. It was in this maelstrom of fear and confusion that Naruto's voice cut through the noise, sharp and absolute. Enough. His voice was amplified by his own power, a roar of command that momentarily stunned everyone into silence. The raw, untamed authority in his tone was more potent than any title. He wasn't a king or a lord. He was a general on a battlefield, and everyone instinctively turned to him. "Panic is a weapon, and right now you're pointing it at yourselves," he snapped, his golden eyes blazing. He pointed to Rias's peerage. "Akeno, Kiba, take the east wing. Form a defensive perimeter. Nothing gets in or out. Kaneko, you're with me. We're the spearhead." He looked at Searzex. "Where is the source?" Searzex, his own regal composure restored by Naruto's decisive action, pointed a shaking finger. "The Chamber of Repose. It houses an ancient artifact we believed was merely a power source. It must have been the first seal. Only a Satan has the authority and the power to bypass its wards. It had to be one of us." He looked around, his eyes landing on the empty space where the fourth Satan should have been. "Falbium. Where is Falbium Asmodeus?" The realization struck them all like a physical blow. The lazy, apathetic Satan. The one who was always napping, the one who never cared for politics. It had been the perfect mask. "No time," Naruto barked. "We move, now." He didn't wait for a reply. He kicked off the floor. A golden blur of motion, with Kaneko a silent, powerful shadow right behind him. The Satans, Rias, and Graphia shared a look and followed without hesitation. The political debate was over. The trial was forgotten. The battle for the underworld had begun. They burst from the council chamber into a scene from a madman's nightmare. The grand, elegant halls of the palace were twisted and deformed. The statues of past heroes had melted into weeping, amorphous blobs. And the royal guards, once the proud, disciplined protectors of the capital, were now a horde of monsters. Some skittered on walls on too many bladed legs. Others were hulking brutes of corrupted armor and flesh, their swords fused to their arms. They shrieked with a mindless, unified purpose, to spread the chaos. "Do not hold back," Searzex commanded, his body erupting in the crimson aura of the power of destruction. "These are no longer our people. They are puppets of the enemy." He unleashed a wave of his power. And a dozen of the corrupted guards were not just killed, but completely unmade, their very atoms erased from existence. Seraphal Leviathan became a maelstrom of ice, her playful magic turned into a lethal weapon as she froze and shattered dozens more. Ajuka's eyes glowed, and intricate magic circles appeared in the air, firing beams of pure, analytical energy that deconstructed the monsters on a conceptual level. This was the power of the Satans, a force that could end worlds. But the tide of monsters was endless. For every one they destroyed, 2 more seemed to crawl from the warping walls. Naruto was a whirlwind of brutal efficiency in their midst. He didn't have the wide-scale destructive power of the Saiyans, but he was faster, more precise. He moved through the horde like a surgeon's scalpel. A Rasengan tore through the chest of a hulking brute. A quick series of hand signs, and a volley of wind style, Rasenshuriken, miniature golden versions of his ultimate technique, sliced through a rank of skittering creatures, their microscopic blades severing the chaotic energy that held them together. He saw patterns in the chaos, strategic weaknesses in the horde. They're mindless, he yelled over the din of battle. They're drawn to the largest source of power. Don't spread out, concentrate your fire. Rias, with me, we're punching a hole. Rias didn't hesitate, she moved to his side, her own crimson energy flaring. They became a 2-person wrecking crew, his golden power and her crimson destruction weaving together in a devastating dance. He would break their ranks, and she would obliterate the scattered remnants. They moved in perfect sync, a warrior and a queen fighting back to back, their powers complementing each other as if they were made for it. For the first time, the Saiyans witnessed Naruto's true nature. He was not just a powerhouse. He was a commander, born and bred for the chaos of war. His instincts, his snap judgments, his ability to create order in the midst of pandemonium were on a level they had never seen. He was leading them, and they were following, because in this moment, his experience was worth more than all their ancient power. Ey fought their way through the corrupted palace, a small island of order in a sea of madness, until they reached the massive, sealed doors of the Chamber of Repose. The doors were shattered, blown outward, and from the archway poured a river of pure, violet-black chaotic energy. The concentration of it was so thick it was almost liquid. At the center of the vast, circular chamber, floating where a massive crystalline seal had once hovered, was Falbium Asmodeus. He looked nothing like the lazy devil they had known. His body was elongated, twisted, his fine clothes fused with his skin, which was now the color of a deep bruise. Multiple, glowing purple eyes had opened all over his body, and they all stared with a look of serene, blissful emptiness. The chaotic energy poured from him, as if he were a living gateway. So, Falbium's voice echoed, not from his mouth, but from every direction at once. It was a calm, dispassionate sound. You've come to witness the beginning of the end. Isn't it beautiful, Falbium? What have you done? Searsex roared, his voice shaking with betrayal and rage. Why? Falbium's head tilted, a gesture that was profoundly inhuman. Because I was tired, Searsex. Tired of the endless cycle. War, peace, betrayal, honor. The constant, meaningless struggle. I have watched our kind for millennia, and I have seen no progress. We are a flawed, failed creation, a brief, noisy error in an eternity of silence. He spread his arms, and the chaotic energy surged. The sleeper does not want to rule. It does not want to conquer. It simply wants to correct the error. To unmake this painful, pointless reality and return everything to the peaceful, perfect void from which it was born. I am not its servant. I am its first true believer. I am the herald of its tranquility. This was a motivation they could not comprehend. It was not a lust for power or a desire for revenge. It was a complete, philosophical rejection of existence itself. This was not a traitor they could reason with. This was a prophet of oblivion. Your tranquility is the death of everything we love. Rias screamed, her power flaring. Falbium's many eyes settled on her, and for the first time, a flicker of something, pity, perhaps, crossed his face. Love is the most beautiful, and thus the most painful, of the flaws. It will be a mercy when it is gone. He raised a hand, and the army of chaos monsters that filled the city suddenly stopped their mindless rampage. In unison, they turned and began to surge back toward the palace, toward the chamber, a living tidal wave of horrors coming to protect their new god. The first seal is broken, Falbium's voice echoed. The sleeper begins to wake. You cannot stop this. You can only choose the dignity of your end. Naruto stepped forward, planting his feet on the desecrated floor. He looked at the endless horde converging on them. He looked at the corrupted Satan, a being of immense power now acting as a conduit for a reality-ending entity. He looked at Rias and the others, their faces grim, their power ready. He had faced impossible odds before. He had fought armies, gods, and monsters. This was just another Tuesday. He cracked his neck, and a slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. It was the grin of a man who was utterly, completely in his element. "You talk a lot about the end," Naruto called out, his voice ringing with defiance. He raised his fist, and a torrent of golden, draconic power erupted around him, a beacon of life and will in the heart of the encroaching darkness. "But you seem to have forgotten something. I'm the guy who writes the last chapter." The standoff was set, the King of Oblivion versus the Dragon of Creation, with the fate of the underworld hanging in the balance. Chapter 9 End.